So, hi everybody. I'm Darren Way, and I teach high school Spanish in Wayne County. And how about that? We'll keep it sort of general, not specific, maybe. A lot of people know who I am. I'm like the only one that everly, that posts constantly on the group page. It's almost like I just basically have a monologue of myself all the time on that page. All right, so take it away, Brian R.
Well, I'm Brian Reardon. I teach in Livingston County, and there's only like 4 schools, so limited down to that. So, and I teach Spanish at the high school, one of the high schools, the green and gold one. Um, and yeah, I teach Spanish 3, 4, and AP language. So yeah, that's me.
Tim, take it away.
Hey, I'm one of the West Siders here. I teach in Grand Rapids Public Schools in the high school that covers 3/4 of Grand Rapids as far as where students go if they don't go to another high school. So if you know Grand Rapids, you can figure that out. I teach Spanish 1 and 2. And next year, Spanish for Spanish speakers, which my school sorely needs because 60% of our kids are Latino. And we'll have it next year.
Right. Oh, yes, by the way, yeah, I teach Spanish 1 and 2 too. So we can talk what level we teach as well. Okay. Christine.
Hi, my name is Christine Ladner, and I teach in Plymouth Schools in Wayne County, and I teach a 6th grade exploratory class that encompasses Spanish, French, German, and Chinese. I also throw in some other languages like Japanese because that's my certification, and I've been teaching that course for a couple of months. But before then, I taught a similar course in 5th grade for 8 years. Before that, I taught Japanese, elementary, high school, middle school. So that's me.
Okay. All right. So without further ado, yeah, because Christine and I work with each other in a certain school district that I think she just mentioned. So, and that's okay. And then lastly, Mr. Marshall, go ahead, who's not in Michigan right now. He's somewhere else in the world. So Nick, take it away.
So I'm Nick Marshall, and I teach in Jackson County. Currently, I'm on what I call sabbatical, and I'm down in Mexico right now, working working in a high school with English learners. So that's my master's degree, and so in the school I teach at, or in the district I teach at, we typically have or we had 3 people who were certified, including myself in Spanish, but we only had like 1 person teaching high school Spanish full time, and then I taught a middle school Spanish for high school credit, and that was pretty much it. So, in terms of running the gambit, in terms of school sizes, I'm probably on the small side from what everybody else has said.
Yeah. Very interesting. I envy that. I was in Puebla, or I passed, like I told you, I passed through Puebla from Mexico City to Oaxaca a couple years ago. I didn't go into Puebla, but yeah. As far as Christine and I go, yes, I think that, well, Tim, I don't know. But our district is pretty huge. We have like, I don't know, I would say 20, between the middle school and the high schools, 27 world language teachers or something crazy like that.
Wow.
No, I'm a similar sized district, but my high school only has 1 Spanish teacher. There are if you look deep on, you will see there are some problems in that we only have 2 world language teachers at a school that has over or right around 1,000 kids. If you want to look at educational racism, it's right there. But it means I can teach very well.
Tim, I don't want to show us our discussion questions, but you mentioned this. Do you think that has something to do with like, I don't know, like the population of Latino speakers that are in your district, so they don't feel the need to, I don't know.
No, I would say Mine is the school that kids go to if they don't go to one of the other schools. Grand Rapids Public Schools has a fair amount of kind of like specialty schools. And we all know that separate is inherently unequal. And so apparently if you want to become a diploma factory, which it isn't a diploma factory, but you know, there's a push to, we just need to get kids to graduate. So, you know, why would you need Spanish 3-4, French 3-4, another language, you know, if it's black and yeah, you know, this schools that have lots of white kids, they would never be okay with just having Spanish and French 1 and 2. They would demand more languages. So
I would say you and out of all of us, maybe, you know, Nick's obviously, you know, doing, you know, down in Mexico, right? But as far as like, I don't know, I think that, you know, Tim, you've got more free reign as far as like what you're doing to try to, you know, maximize CI in your classes, which a lot of people, you know, would definitely envy, I think. And then Brian being a close second, you know, so yeah, anyways. Well, here, let me, if I can just bring up, I can't seem to, there we go. I'm going to share the screen for a minute. And whoa, there we are on Facebook. So Christine was very nice to put this together. Michigan Comprehensible Input live stream discussion. So, and then we had a couple like discussion questions. I don't know. So, let's see, what do we have here? I would say, how about number, what is your experience in teacher education? I think we kind of have to start with like number 2 in a sense, right?
Okay.
So it says, you know, what was your experience in teacher education in college regarding teaching language, right? Because at one point, right, we all, I think, our only experience with a world language class was when we were in high school ourselves and we were taught a certain way, right, in high school. And we can maybe kind of remember how that way was if we can go back 25 years ago. And then, you know, then we decided, I guess at some point, hey, I want to be a Spanish teacher. And we go to college and we may have, you know, we went through all the College of Ed classes and then may or may not have had like a method or 2 methods classes, you know, in order to graduate through teacher education, you know, world language method 1, you know, whatever they called it. Right. So, yeah, so I don't know, maybe we should start kind of like with that. What was your experience in teacher education in college in regards to teaching language? Is that cool? Then I can, we don't have to stop. I can stop share that too, because it looks better this way, right? So anybody want to start perhaps on that idea?
Do you want me to go first?
Sure.
All right. So so I went to Eastern, and it's traditionally a teacher college. So I just went for certification because I had already gotten my degrees and said, hey, by the way, why don't I try teaching? Because I like that better than my whatever random degree I was getting. So I went back to school and so I just took the courses that I needed to. I didn't get like I didn't get an elementary degree because I already had 2 degrees, but I thought I took a methods class, world language teaching methods class, which was extremely rigorous. I thought it was very good. And world language methods for elementary. So I had to take another methods class. And then I had to do student teaching for high school and then student teaching for elementary. So I had to do 2 student teaching stints. So it took a whole year. And that's because I had a K-12 Japanese certification. I also had to take a Japanese world language teaching methods class as well. And I thought that was good. It was all taught completely in Japanese, which I loved. So, but my methods class, the basis of it was really, you start with student teacher. So coming from the teacher, which is basically input. So student teacher, lots and lots and lots of that. And you just like dump a lot of input on them. And she called it like buckets of language, keep dumping buckets of language on your students. And then you expect them to respond at some point. So then it's student teacher interaction is the next step. And then they get comfortable, they're shy, you use all these strategies to help them, to guide them, to give them scaffolding, because they're not going to be comfortable at first. You make it, really break it down, make it easy, make it fun, use cognates, just keep the language simple. And then last one is student, so that they enjoy talking to each other more than they enjoy just telling the teacher what the teacher wants to hear. They actually want to communicate. So that's like the third step. So that was kind of the mindset of the professor that taught the language class, sorry, the world language teaching methods class. And she also required us to memorize the 5 C's front and back, and also present at a conference. So it was rigorous, but it was, I thought, very valuable. So
Yeah. Okay. Um, huh. I'll try to keep mine brief here. Long story short, I mean, I had two methods classes at Wayne State, and then I took some other methods class, I think in my master's program as well, because I had a master's in world language education. And I had like methods 3 maybe, or something like that. But what I remember is this was like 2000, I don't know, 2004. My methods teacher at Wayne State actually was my 7th grade world language teacher in a middle school in Livonia, Michigan. And I'm like, why does she look so familiar? I mean, and I only had her once, and then I don't know, I found my yearbook and I digged. I'm like, that is I had her in 7th grade, and now I'm 22, 23 years old taking her in a methods class. And I showed her the yearbook and everything. But the main thing was we talked about Stephen Krashen. We did have a textbook that we had to buy, whether it was methods 1 or 2 class. I don't remember, but Bill Van Patten was part of the co-authors of a book as well. That was the first time I heard the name Bill Van Patten, was in 2004, on the front cover of some textbook that I had to buy at Wayne State. Okay. So, and it talked about communicative language teaching and structured input. I can't remember the title of the book right now, but, and we watched like the 1980s, like famous video in class, I remember, of Stephen Krashen talking about input, and so, yeah. And then that was basically, and we had to do like a PSYOP or something it was called. But I guess the point I'm making is yeah, I mean, I've been familiar with this stuff when I was in college, and the necessity of input in a world language class, which I don't think a lot of times, even today, is not part of the rhetoric that's happening in teacher education. I don't think still, you know what I mean? So that's my little anecdote.
Well, I'll go if no one else is. I went to Grand Valley. I would have had methodology in 2013. And in 2013 at Grand Valley, I heard a lot about comprehensible input. Like Darren, I heard Stephen Krashen this, Stephen Krashen that. The interesting thing is, in my methodology courses, there was all sorts of great theory and 0 practicality. So I've heard all the necessity for comprehensible input, but the only possible real strategy. Well, we learned, the, what do you call them? The brecha de información, information gaps, where partner A has one thing, partner B has other information. And in all reality, the students talk to each other in language 1 about whatever content they're supposed to be talking about, because that's just logical what you do when 2 people speak the same language. That's what you would do. And we also learned about the PACE method, which I had a teacher assistant this semester who did a wonderful job, did lots of things in Spanish. The kids actually understood her quite well, except for when she tried to use the PACE method. So I'm very glad I was exposed to communicative teaching, but I didn't really have any tools from college. Go ahead, Christine.
Oh, what's the PACE method?
PACE, it's basically presentation and then 3 other things. If you Google it, you'll see it. But a thing where you start with inputs, but then later on kids are co-constructing grammar rules. So really a quarter of the class is going to be input. And then after that, the students are trying to figure out grammar rules, and then they will write their own sentences using these grammar rules at the end. So it's an improvement over, a purely grammatical presenting things out of context. At least things are presented in a communicative context. In my experience, it's really tough to do in a level 1 or 2 classroom and remain in the target language.
Well,
Who does that in target language? Please let me know. Go ahead there.
no, thank you. So I went to Central, and we started talking a little bit about the CI and some stuff, and I guess there's a big difference. CI wasn't that big of a thing, but they did have we did bring in some people, or the professor brought in some people who did fully immersion, and I still remember this day. She came in and she's talking to her kids with Spanish, and not just like "Hola, cómo estás" kind of thing. Like it was a legit, like telling them what to do, like kind of intense, or maybe not intense, but just like in-depth directions. And wow, that's so cool. But we did talk a little bit about the PACE method too. But one of the things too that I don't know, CI, I don't know if it just hadn't had that name yet or what, but I remember going to a couple different conferences, and there was a person who I really, really respect, and she said, immersion doesn't work, and maybe immersion works. And the people who came were from a private school who, obviously had been there for a while and that kind of stuff. And this other person was up by Lansing, and I think teaching, maybe everybody, not just, the people who wanted to be in there. But in terms of CI, I can't say that I have a ton of experience with it. I actually started it for the first time. I did a lot of information gap stuff and that kind of thing. And that was our methods person was always big on get them speaking. Okay, so when I was doing this, or when I was teaching, it'd be like, okay, here's a grammar point. We'll talk a little bit about it. We'll get some practice, and then we'll do speaking with it. So it wasn't just like, okay, we're gonna do translations. Last year was the first time I did CI for the first time from the beginning of the year, and I was pretty happy with the results. There were some things I was like, okay, I wish I would have done this a little bit different. Yeah, I thought it was interesting to see the growth.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a topic in and of itself that we could talk about down the road, as far as showing what are students able to produce depending on what, how they were engaged with language in class, you know what I mean? And yeah, anyways, but that's another topic for another day. Brian, you didn't chime in yet.
No, I'll go ahead. So I
All
went
right.
no, you're good. I went to Albion College, and I'm trying to think. I was trying to think of when I had my methodology course. It was probably like 98 or 99. And I just happened to run across my methodology book, I don't know, last year or so. And I said, let me thumb through this. And I went back into the index and the research, and I noticed that Bill Manhattan had been mentioned. I noticed that there, I think the ACTFL standards were just starting to roll out, just starting to become a thing. But I don't think we ever called it CI per se, or TPRS, or any of those things. That they weren't really mentioned back then. And honestly, I don't remember a lot from my methodology course. I think there were some things like you mentioned, Nick, about like, practice, get the grammar points, practice it, then kind of take it to the speaking. And I would say a lot of that I learned through my student teaching experience. I student taught at Albion High School, which no longer exists, unfortunately. And the teacher there was a really good teacher, but it was traditional. And so I would say that a lot of, but again, this idea of not just translation or just verbs, but, trying to put what we were learning to use, but still based in that traditional method. And I mean, to be honest, I taught that way for about 15 years, probably 14, 15 years before I really started to learn about CI, which I know is a question that's coming up later on about that. But so yeah, that was my experience. But I might not look like it, but I've been teaching for 22 years now. So, or I'm sorry, 20 years, 21 if you count my student teaching. So yeah, got a baby face is what I've been told. So
You sure do. Yes, but I'm not too far behind you though. So, well, it seems like we kind of had some similar like experiences, right, with methods classes in college, and I still think, and I think all of us listened to Bill Van Patten and Talking L2 and some of his last closing remarks that he made on his last couple episodes before he retired. The second show about will CI survive was his topic, right? And teachers have to be kind of like advocates to continue that idea, because, and he says, like, changing things at the university level, he put it as like it's trying to move, it's like moving mountains or some sort of analogy. But but that's just the thing. Like, it seems like and he thinks, he believes that, like, in the United States, he still thinks that maybe people who are using CI as the focus in their world language class is only 10% of the United States. We might have the illusion that it seems like there's a lot more if you keep seeing the constant posts on CI liftoff in the IFLT Facebook group and everything else, thinking, wow, there's so many teachers doing this now. But I think still he's probably right that, maybe 10 to 15% of every world language teacher in the United States is still doing stuff based on the PPP model and, what the publishers tell them how language is supposed to be taught through verb conjugation charts and, made up rules and things on page 32 and, things like that. And I don't know. I mean, that's, it doesn't seem like teachers who are teaching methods classes in universities are people who are that know anything about second language acquisition. They're not researchers of everything themselves, and I think maybe sometimes they're doing something else in their studies, and they're just they have to teach a methods class because somebody has to do it, I guess. But I don't think a lot of them are researchers of second language acquisition, and in which case, the vast majority of the time, I think teachers who get a sense of what CI means, that it's a construct of acquisition, and how to use it, is if by some chance they happen upon a conference to get that kind of information. Now, Christine's, I don't know if she's responding to something else in the house or she's muted right now. I don't know if she has anything to say about that, so I will stop talking now. Okay.
Yeah, so I did feel satisfied with my college methods class. I felt like it was good. So I would disagree with you. I felt like the person who was the professor for most of my methods class was very CI focused, but didn't call it that. So she said, if you have use context, use visuals, use sounds, use nodding your head, use gestures, use everything at your disposal to make them understand it. You don't have to translate. So that's what CI is anyway, making your input comprehensible. And I felt like that's what my professor's focus was, without calling it CI, because this was back in like 2000, 2001, I think 2001. So it wasn't such a, it wasn't like in the world language methods teaching textbook at the time, but she had the mindset. So I was satisfied with that. her mindset.
I would agree. Like mine at Central was, I mean, her PhD was from Ohio State in second language acquisition. So, I mean, like her whole thing was get them interested, get them hooked. I mean, it wasn't necessary. It may not have been CI per se, and I don't. I mean, I'm kind of going off memory now, so there've been a lot of moons that have passed from between then and now. But it's just one of those things that I don't remember. Like you said, I don't think they ever used CI, but I mean, there was this big push to use as much language as possible in the classroom, and whether it be in songs, whether it be in like, hey, here's a picture. We're going to talk about this picture, and we're going to describe it, and we're going to do this, this, and this. It was like you said, I don't think it was necessarily described as CI, but maybe like the precursor, like this is what we should be doing. We need to be talking in the language. And like I said, you know, sometimes I think we get caught up in like these necessarily grammar rules or something like that. And I'll admit I was in it, but at the same time, it's like, okay, I don't know, I guess it's kind of like, I mean, in some ways I think of it, and I'm not trying to defend it in any way, shape, or form, but it's like kind of like math. You practice it, or you get the information, and then you practice it, and then you put it into practice, you know? So like, and a lot of people have always said that language is kind of like math. And so, and again, I'm not just trying to say this is one way or the other, but you know, I would try myself personally to try to include it as much as possible, and I did it a lot more before finally switching over to CI. But I mean, I don't know. I guess that would be my point. I don't think that, you know, just saying, well, we're all teaching grammar, and that's as accurate as it could be.
I was never even encouraged to teach grammar explicitly, usually, unless you just had to, you know, unless it just made sense. Instead, we were sort of encouraged to have students elicit the grammar rule from them, which is like, you know, kind of easy because they can see the pattern. So give them 4 sentences, and one of the sentences has something slightly different, and that one's, you know, what do you think the difference is? And or like, why do these end with A and these end with O, and how come we use you know? So eliciting that is within the student's capability, and I was always encouraged to, if it's something the kids can recognize the pattern on their own, then don't just say, by the way, the feminine requires this article and the masculine. No, we were not told to do that at all. We were told to give them lots of input, give them lots of patterns, and then stop and say, well, how did you know to use la? And they're like, well, because the abuela ends in A, and it always seems like we have to use la for that. So it's within their ability to recognize those patterns on their own. You just have to find the right point to stop and say, well, how come you did that? Why did you know the answer? And then they come up with the rule. And then we actually have them write down the rule that they came up with. So it's like they're writing their own textbook, and it's so much better for their memory if they have thought of it themselves. So that's how I was, that's what was exciting for me, was that you're really giving the kids credit for being able to figure out language patterns on their own.
I like that too, and I always did. I kind of did that. It may have been, you know, I didn't follow the 90-10 rule or whatever. I was just like, wait a second, why did we do that? And like you said, you know, and most of them would say, well, I don't know, it just sounds right or something like that. Oh, okay, well, and then like you said, you don't, well, let's write this down, blah 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 blah, you know. And so, like you said, it helps when they have a little bit. It's almost like they're teaching themselves. And it's like, oh yeah, well, let's write this down before you forget, because you guys want to. But that's helpful.
Um, so, yeah, we have a couple of these topics, right? We're looking at the time, and it's like we're already like 30 minutes in. But sometimes I think that even that alone, I think is something. I mean, I could ask you something to further this like discussion as well, just for this one question alone about what happens in methods class in the College of Ed. You know, um, Now, I know that it wasn't necessarily our case, but sometimes when I look at like, let's say a certain textbook out there and it's been made into a Facebook group, and I'll see posts of like teachers saying, "Hi, first year teacher, second year teacher, does anybody have an activity about reflexive verbs?" So then I wonder, well, then what was that? I see it a lot too, by the way. And so I wonder, well, what was their experience in college? Or maybe there are a lot of up and coming teachers that um, have dabble with CI and stuff in the university, but whatever school they end up like applying to and getting a job, that they just, well, okay, this is what this department's doing, is the reality of these textbook. And then maybe some certain things that they were taught in university kind of go away, I guess, because they're just going ahead and conforming to whatever the established textbook curriculum is.
Yeah, I think that's most people's reality is you're entering a department that isn't fresh out of college the way you are. You're entering a department that has been there for 40 years. And so there's always some leftovers from 40-year-old, methods. And so I just think that's people's reality is they do have to follow a curriculum. These courses are articulated. So typically they're going to say, well, this textbook has pretty good order of events. So let's follow that. And then 20 years later, they're still following it, or maybe they change textbooks. But so I think most people's reality is that they have to incorporate CI into the structure that's already there. So if they have to do reflexive verbs, then they're just come up with a fun story, great context, great visuals, just some fun way to do CI with a reflexive verb, because you can do CI with anything. But I think you're spot on that it's not really coming from the colleges, it's coming from just real life.
But I still think some of it has to be coming from the colleges, though. I mean, I don't think a lot of methods classes are talking about the history of how input is the focal point of acquisition. And maybe, I don't know, I could be wrong. Maybe are they giving out like textbooks on the natural approach, and and talking about Stephen Krashen and the input hypothesis, and looking at the numerous books that Bill Van Patten has written, along with other I don't know, maybe so, maybe not. I mean, we're all like so removed from college now these days, but
I think of one more anecdote there. Like I said, my teacher assistant this semester did a wonderful job, and she was very interested in CI. Her professor wrote like his PhD thesis on CI, because I Googled it because I was curious. And the man teaches about comprehensible input, but he's done a PhD, but has never actually taught K-12 language classes. And so he's teaching these students these wonderful communicative ways to learn languages. And these communicative things, like I said, information gap, those things work beautiful on paper. But if anyone has actually seen an information gap do really well with a group of level 1 or 2 students that weren't paying to be in that class, I would love to hear it, because I never have.
And even in schools that are, I know for sure, I have a student teacher this semester I was mentioning before we started, and he's from Michigan State. So he came into our department in the perfect situation, in the sense that we're CI completely. He learned the theory, the idea, and now he can learn the practice of it. But there's, I think, where the disconnect is, and a lot of times, even if these universities are teaching the theory behind CI, like Michigan State is, when they get into their internship then and they're going to a traditional setting, that's how you're probably going to end up teaching, if you don't learn how to put it into practice, because so much of the methodology is theory and not so much practice. I think there's 6 or 7 other world language teachers in his cohort for the secondary, and he's the only one that's in a CI district. And so for him, it's great, but for the other ones, he kind of, he feels bad for them that they're not getting that practice.
Well, and I mean, okay, so again, I don't mean to be the contrarian here in any way, shape, or form, but one thing that I think we kind of forget too, like I didn't do CI for quite a bit because at the end of the day, like I didn't know where to start. And so like I could put like mini lessons in, but until I bought Somos from Martina Vex, like I had no idea what to do. And I had this problem right now. Like I got to a class, or I got down here, I'm teaching in a class, and they're like, okay, we're going to teach these topics. I said, okay, you need to teach vocabulary. And I said, okay, what's the vocab? And they said, oh, you can pick whatever words you want. Well, I told my boss, it's like putting yourself out in the middle of the ocean and hoping to God you find an island somewhere. And at the end of the day, like, I'm not saying that it's easier, but for some people it did. I mean, here's a text. I know what I have to do tomorrow. Boom. And like I said, especially if they haven't had, and Darren and I have talked about this quite a bit, if they haven't had any practice in CI, or they don't know what it is, to jump off of that textbook into something that's kind of like, well, it's a little bit more free range, that's hard. That's hard, and especially if you don't have something where you can follow. Because I can tell you right now, I without buying Somos, I couldn't have done it. And just because I wouldn't have known where to start.
I totally agree with that. I mean, I've had to, I think I've worked harder now in these last 3 or 4 years developing CI materials and going out and looking for ideas. I mean, when I taught Spanish 1, I used the Somos, but now with 3, 4, and AP, you need things a little bit more advanced, and there's stuff out there. But I mean, I've listened to podcasts, I mean, outside of BVP, like Inspired Proficiency, get ideas from that podcast. The CI Facebook groups. It's been a lot of work, and it's been a labor of love, but not everybody has that time. Not everybody has maybe that even ability necessarily. So it's not, I completely agree with you, Nick. It is not an easy process to go from to move to a completely CI frame of mind. Now I've gotten to the point now where things are starting to become a little more automatic, but it's certainly it's a lot of work. This old dog's had to learn a lot of new tricks.
Yes. So you're right. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day, in which, I've been doing CI my entire life, but I've always been tied to a textbook. So I kind of wonder myself, actually, that I would kind of maybe be on the struggle bus if it's like, there's no more textbook. And it's like, whoa, what do I do? See, it's kind of easy for me because, I do movie talks and stories and write stories, but it's based on a thematic unit. I've got the House and Shores unit, which I'm in right now. And so it's easier versus, being on a free for all, I guess, which that would be kind of intimidating. And I guess maybe people like Christy Placido and maybe Carrie Toth and, other teachers who, maybe a lot of their curriculum are the novels that they've written, they're the pros, I think, because, they're doing CI on a full organic level, I guess, and me, myself, even though I've been doing CI for 13, 14 years, I would probably have some issues myself, but it's a little more, it's more controlled because I'm in a thematic unit. So
Yeah. So I am certified in Japanese. And at the time I was certified, which is I think 2001, 2002, the Japanese textbooks were really, really terrible. They were really terrible. So I started my career without really, respecting the textbook, because we were all like, well, what do you do for this? What do you do for this? So just as teachers, we collaborated and we came up with stuff. Or if you were a one-person shop, then you just came up with your own stuff. You're like, oh, and then over the years, you just built it, and you started out kind of being terrible, and then over the years, you got better. So I think it's not really a matter of it being, really intimidating. It's just like you just need to set your expectations as, you're not going to be perfect the first year. It's not going to be an amazing year. The second year is a lot more experience, things in your back pocket that you can just pull out at any moment. And so I feel like with teaching a less commonly taught language for so many years, you are writing constantly. And so it becomes easier over time. So once so it's not always possible to do all that in 1 year. So if you just kind of add little bits over time, that's a lot more doable.
Yeah, I wasn't that bright. I just jumped right into it. I mean, and I have an advantage in that, so I teach 3, 4, and AP. The only class that I share with another teacher is 3, and she's also kind of my co-founder of CI where we're at. So there's no mystery as to where we're at anymore, by the way. I wore the shirt. So I did, and I really should have. And so I guess I would say if anyone's listening that's not sure about getting to CI, what you say, Christine, is exactly 100% right. Adding it little by little is extremely important, because I stressed myself out beyond all belief for that first year. I mean, I learned a lot. I certainly did. But yeah, as I had a student once tell me, the first pancake is never the best. And I thought that's very true for adding CI into your curriculum or to your life.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, a lot of people have said that too, that they just jump in. There's got to be I envy this though, in a sense. I'd be a little kind of, it'd take me a learning curve too but there's got to be some, for you, Brian, there's got to be some sort of liberation, being able to do what you do. You know what I mean? And most of everyone else is on the same mindset. So it's just a little bit more, just a sense of relaxation and freedom, in a sense, when you walk into your classroom.
Well, yeah, certainly. I'll be on kind of the quick history of it. Was about 5 years ago. I started listening to Tea with BVP after I got this random email, a spam email from him, from the show, and I got listening. Man, this is kind of interesting. I learned more and more about it, and I started to add it in the second semester of whatever year that was. And it was after school. I ran into my cohort so we have a freshman campus. That's where the majority of the Spanish teachers are. There's only 2 at the 10-12 building, and I ran into her. Her name's Marcy, and we just had this kind of discussion out of the blue of we wanted to see some changes in our department. We wanted to move things along in a different way. And I said, well, funny you mentioned that. I've been learning about this thing called comprehensible input. And so the two of us kind of teamed up together and have been going off, often not into the sunset yet, but, off to the races with it. So it definitely is a very fortunate situation, but it was serendipitous in a lot of ways as well.
Yeah, I mean there's a a whole topic of a conversation we could do at one point, as far as well, what can we, what are some success stories, or I'm still trying to wrap my head around teachers who have had success stories, unable to shrink the world language divide, and more so making the jump or the transition into a where CI is the focal point of everything you do in class. I mean, there's got to be some tips to, and tricks, and how to be diplomatic, and things you can say to try to, I mean, what do you do when you have, 10, a Spanish high school, and there's 5 other, Spanish teachers, you know what I mean? And, the smaller the easier, but the bigger, way more difficult, and I can attest to that. But that's another, that could be a whole nother conversation, because I think a lot of people are in that same boat, more so than we think, as far as like, how do people come to a consensus and agreement on, what we want our kids to be able to do, and what does assessment look like, and just the friction that happens when students are moving on to different teachers, and then the total which way of how they've ever been assessed or taught is flipped upside down, and then it creates frustration for teachers and students alike. And that's a whole nother bag of conversation for another time. So anyways, this has been a great, cool conversation. I know that Christine wants to share some things, so I'm going to see if I'm able to. Are you sharing screen, Christine?
No, it's just I'll just, if you spotlight me, that'll be enough. I'm a paper person, obviously. So, but I also think you should share that video background, the PowerPoint background tip, which I thought was fantastic for, at some point. So what I wanted to share was kind of illustrated notebooks. So the strategies we use to tell a story using the whiteboard, and drawing all over the place and pointing, and kind of keeps kids engaged when we tell a story. That same kind of methodology can be used in students' note taking. So you can have the kids' notebooks actually be comprehensible input again, so that when they're studying for a test, they're looking at stuff like this. Is that backwards for y'all? Is that flipped? No. Okay. So if you don't speak German, can you figure out what this means? Ich habe eine Katze. So, Darren, if you could go to the upper right-hand corner of my screen and click spotlight to spotlight me. The 3 dots, click on the 3 dots, and now I'm big for everyone. So the first one says, Ich habe eine, and then I would write Katze. Ich habe keine Katze. So this really easy drawing, if you don't speak German, can you guys understand what that means? So take a stab at it. What does that mean?
I have a cat. I don't have a cat.
I have a cat. I don't have a cat. So these little arm movements of just like the smile, the have a cat in the hand, and then empty hands and a frown. So something as easy as that, if a kid's notebook looks like this, then it doesn't have to look like habe means have and keine means none. You don't have to do that. You can just have them make a little quick illustration that does the same thing, and also just keeps them in the target language when they're reading their notes, because their notes, maybe they don't take any notes, or maybe they take notes and it's all like grammar patterns or just example sentences. If it's like 2 people in a speech bubble, suddenly it's a conversation, suddenly it's a story, suddenly it has context. And this is just really easy to do. So for possessives, you just have 2 people and 2 of the same thing, and they point to theirs and the other one points to theirs. I don't know, this is my Coke, this is my drink, this is my drink, or something. Or like for schools, mi escuela es Liberty, y tú, mi escuela es West. So just having 2 humans pointing to the 2 buildings, and it's very obvious. It's very obvious. So just 2 stick figures, 2 buildings that look somewhat like a school, and then that's easy note taking. Another one, anyone speak Japanese? No, okay. So let's see if you can figure out what this means. So the top one, I would put Doritos ga ski desu. Twizzlers wa ski janai desu. So what do you think ski desu means and ski janai desu means? So Doritos ga ski desu. Twizzlers wa ski janai desu. Any guesses?
I like Doritos and
I
I don't
like.
like Twists.
I like and I don't like. Right. So just these little guys, a little smile and a thumbs up. So oftentimes we do a thumbs up or a smile, but smile can mean happy. And so it gets confusing in their notebooks. But if it's a smile and a thumbs up, that is definitely like, and a smile and a thumbs down, it's definitely don't like. And it makes it just a quick drawing. So this is after you've told a story, after you've given them lots of input, make their notebooks also be comprehensible so that when they're reading their notebook, they're getting you again. You know what I mean? I think I had, oh, like little, like asking for something or ordering something. You just have two people on the phone. A phone is a rectangle, a black rectangle, and that's it. So here's a guy on the phone. So who is he? All I did was put a hat on him and suddenly he is the pizza guy, right? So you call bonjour fils pizza and bonjour une pizza avec blah blah blah. S'il vous plaît. Oui, d'accord. So this is just obviously a phone conversation. And so you have the context, like even if you didn't speak French, you'd be like, this guy's on the phone. This guy with the hat is on the phone. I think he is calling some place of business that serves food because somehow the hat equals you work at a fast food restaurant or something. So those little quick things to make your kids note-taking, also comprehensible input are very quick, and I think make it fun for them to read through and kind of remember the stories you told in class. So some people don't use notebooks, some people use electronic notebooks. My kids, they handwrite every single day, and then I have notebook checks which take about a second to grade. So anyway, that's what I wanted to show you. So you can unspotlight me now. Just click on the thing. Thanks.
You're still spotlighted though on my end. Wait, hold on.
Oh, so you just have
There
to
you
click
are.
in the upper right pane and change it to gallery view.
Right. Okay. I hate remove.
So
That's-
every time, so I teach on Zoom every single day.
Hey,
I
me
always
too.
spotlight myself. Yeah. Hey, you too. So I always spotlight myself when I'm teaching, and I can record it, and none of the kids' faces will be in the recording. That's just a little tip.
Yeah. Interesting. For sure.
So how do you guys react to that? Is that like oh, we don't like take notes, or how do they study for quizzes and stuff? If you do quizzes, I try to make the quizzes really kind of fun and sort of similar to what we did in class, so that if they were paying attention, it's so easy. And I give, yeah.
No. Yeah, I do the best I can to, I've been Zooming since day one, and I don't think Brian's been face to face for a good chunk of time so far since the beginning of the year. I I haven't had kids in my classroom since last March. So so yeah.
I teach in the virtual academy, 100% virtual this entire year. Even if the kids go back, my students are 100% virtual.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't do I personally haven't been doing a lot of I never, even when I was in the classroom, I wouldn't like draw like stick figures and do drawings on the whiteboard like I know a lot of teachers do with CI and stuff. I usually just crop out people that I find on Google and I paste them in a background of some sort, or I do movie talk, and but yeah, I do a lot of 90% of what I do is shared screen, and so like today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of a techie person. However, I just love having them write, draw, and okay, everybody show me your notebooks, and they all are laughing at each other because they're so terrible. And there's that I can draw a stick figure. And that's all I'm asking them to do is draw a stick figure. And then so it's kind of fun and kind of funny. And it also just tells like a tiny microscopic story, you know. So if I don't just have them draw vocabulary, I have them draw like a little conversation or a little story. And sometimes I tell a story using drawings, and then I have them sort of do a little recap in their notes. So that's appropriate for some people if you feel like that would work for you. And then some people, I mean, everyone's got their own kind of thinking as far as what they want their kids to do. So
No. I mean, you just like reminded me of like some fleeting thought that I had weeks ago or something about, yeah, like just, having the students, even if we're back physically in the classroom also, but yeah, just take out a piece of paper and, and then I just start like describing something, saying like, obviously in Spanish, but I'd say it in English, so that, right, that they're interacting with the language as far as drawing. I'm like, all right, class. So, you know, there's a living room and there is a child with her parents in the living room, and right, and so they're drawing stick figures of a kid and two parents, and there's a couch. And I mean, in a sense, I'm on a thematic unit, so, and I'll probably start talking like, okay, well, there's a couch, and there's a rug on the floor, and there's a mirror above the couch, and just run the gamut of the thematic unit that my hands are tied to. And then, I could say, the mother says to the daughter, hey, I need you to clean your room, or because the chores are in the unit too, So anyway, so they all draw up some sort of like, of what I like, just a small little like scenario, not some long drawn out story, but just a little scenario of something, and then they can all hold it up or turn it in. And
is there like a sentence structure that you're supposed to have a little focus on in the rooms of the house or the furniture thematic unit?
oh, of course, there's some sort of forced like structure that's in the textbook.
Because it's the structure really that that we're drawing, because we're not drawing vocabulary, we're drawing like the whole, like a little sentence. So like my favorite, or
Yeah.
I this couch is old, or something like that, or this couch is comfortable, this couch is terrible, or something like that. The cat, like maybe a cat is laying on the couch saying, this couch is comfortable, but the human, there's springs coming up or something like that, and they're like, oh, this couch is uncomfortable. There's some story in there that you could draw out. Whatever the sentence structure is, that's them talking. The vocabulary is sort of secondary. It just gives them like more little tools. It's like ingredients, but it's actually the recipe, that the sentence structure is like what holds all the ingredients together.
Okay, well, I mean, if you want, well, I mean, the structure, I mean, the point that the textbook publishers are trying to address is the you familiar of a command verbs like clean your room, and the present progressive of the present progressive, like she is cleaning.
Okay.
So that's what's embedded in the house unit right now. Brian, aren't you glad that you don't have to maybe?
Well, it's funny you're talking about that, because one of the things that I've been wanting to really push my more advanced students to use are some of those more advanced structures. And I use a lot of write and discuss, the Tina Hargan idea of, you have an input stream, then you write about it. And also trying to get kids to be using more kind of advanced type structures on like the AP stuff as well. I actually had did a write and discuss where they were talking about, long story, but essentially I was able to embed things like using the subjunctive, which I kind of did it on purpose, but it wasn't the focus. Like I didn't say, hey kids, we're learning the subjunctive today, but I was able to embed it into an email, and it was based on a story based on an Alvaro Soler song. But basically, they had to recommend whether a friend should go to Barcelona or should go to Puebla, Mexico, which is perfect for Nick, and go there now, right? But we were able to actually embed those types of things as saying, I recommend that you go to Puebla or Barcelona, and here's why. And it really wasn't the focus of what it was. They were learning the subjunctive, they were using the subjunctive, but they didn't know they were, so we didn't call it out. And actually I did do a little pop-up grammar on it as well to say, hey, you guys wondering what's going on here? Here's what it is. All right, you don't need to know this, but here's what it is for you, those that are curious. And then boom, we move on with life. So you know, you can embed it, I think, in there. And even to go off of what Christine's talking about, I use a lot of I do a lot of listen and draws, where especially at the beginning of a unit of a story that we're telling. Usually I'll give a pared down version. I'll give the kids a sheet of paper with eight blank boxes in it, and each one has a number. And I'll tell a story, and they have to draw what they understand. Usually I'll introduce some vocabulary beforehand. We'll kind of do some traditional, well, I usually do it through like Quizlet Live or GimKit or something like that, just to kind of get those words in their head going. And then I tell them the story, of a very simple story, say an 8-sentence story. That's the skeleton of it, without usually giving away the ending. Usually there's a cliffhanger, or the 8th box is write or draw what you think is going to happen next. And then I'll take those drawings, and like you mentioned, Christine, they love to see each other's work. And I'll put that under a document camera, or that's in person, obviously, but there's ways around that, you know, digitally. And they love it. But what they don't realize is they're laughing at each other's stories, but I'm also describing the sentence again. So they're hearing that input stream again and again. And I'll do 4 or 5 of the same sentence, essentially with 4 or 5 different drawings of the same box. And that's just, they're getting that repetition that's so needed. So drawing is a super powerful tool. And I should say, stick figures, I have 3 rules for stick figures. I don't know where I learned this, but 1, they have to have joints, meaning like not joints, but you know, like knees, and you know, they can't just be straight stick figures. They have to have motion, and I usually do that by lines. Like if there's a stick figure, I'll just kind of do a real quick thing here. So joints, hang on. I don't know, this is really bad. I'm really famously bad in my class for my art, but you know, you can see that there are joints here. There's movement, which is by the lines, and then there's a prop. He's got like a football or a piece of bread or whatever the heck it is I just drew there. But when you give those kids those rules, that actually makes their drawings a little bit more detailed, and they go, but they also feel empowered to draw, because if you're an artist like I am, or lack thereof, they go, I can draw a stick figure, but they're also adding a lot more detail than you would just get if you just said, oh, I can't draw. You know, the typical kid of, I can't draw. Yeah, you can do this. And the kids actually like that, especially when you tell them to put joints in there. You gotta be careful with that one. You're on mute, Christine.
Oh, sorry about that. So Darren, you made me think of something. So if it's a chores unit, this guy is on the phone and this guy is doing something. And this guy is named Max. So what do you think his sentence would naturally be? This is
Take out the trash.
no, what is this? This is Max. That's his name. His name's above his head. And this guy's on the phone, and the first word he said is Max. So Max, what would the rest of the sentence be?
Is taking out the trash.
Right. So
Did you
Max
take out the
is
trash?
taking out the trash. So normally we might be like, oh, Max takes out the trash. Max is taking out the trash. Max took out the trash. We're not sure what the tense is. But if someone is on the phone, they're naturally going to say, oh, Max is taking out the trash. Like he can't come to the phone right now, but Max is, so that's a natural way visually to use the is taking, to use that form of the verb. So that's just a visual way to represent that. Is you're recording something. So Max is taking. So it's one way to kind of bring an illustration to represent something that's like, oh, like is, is doing it. How do we represent that? So that's one easy way that doesn't take a lot of effort. It's just person on with a black rectangle, right? Stick figure with a black rectangle. They're on the phone. And the other person doing the action. So that might be useful, if you get to that point.
No. Gotcha. I mean, yeah, I have never like really like dictated during class or anything that would prompt students to start drawing something. It's always been a fleeting thought, but after this conversation, maybe I'll start kind of, doing that. I do two things. One, we've been on here for an hour now, and Mr. Marshall has a comment in the chat that I don't know if anybody wants to address as well. Maybe you want to do another 3 hours tonight? Maybe we can, no, I'm just joking. This actually I think went very well today. Actually, our dynamic and what we had to say and everything seemed to have was quite fluid. I don't know. So I don't know. Oh, and plus you said my name in the chat. I don't know what that's about, but I said hi. And,
sorry, I was gonna type the rest of the sentence, but I decided not to.
Yeah,
I ended up saying it verbally.
Yeah, I mean, by all means, don't think like, well, I got to interject because I got to go. But I do see Nick's little comment here in the thread, but I don't know.
Yeah, so I do have to go too, but I wanted to thank you for setting this up. I thought it was a really great idea and really great discussion.
Yeah, I think it was pretty cool.
I
I would kind of hope that it would be at least something that maybe like teachers who stumble onto the Michigan Facebook group that maybe are like who Brian has in his class, up and coming world language teachers, and and having some more discussions and thoughts that maybe have not been addressed in their universities or who they're under for student teaching, and stuff like that. And I don't know, carrying on the I don't know. Yeah, so I don't know. Anyways, I'll stop talking.
Well, it was a lot of fun. Thanks for inviting me in.
Yeah, it was definitely a surprise that you came on today. I should have recorded this, which I didn't, and I could have put it on YouTube or something. But it'll definitely it's archived on the main page on Facebook, so you can always go back to it there. Maybe there's a way to download it or something like that. But I never hit record, but I know it's on it's on the page to go back to or whatever. So
I'll go back and critique my performance.
yeah. And I know
well,
Amy.
I gotta go, guys. But thank you so much. Okay, I'll see ya.
Adios.